Good evening. Well, first of all, we have the sad duty to say that I'm glad you came and sorry you're going. I'm particularly happy that our classwork this week has included most of the students who have been in class with me for anywhere from 2 to 9 years, so that we have without doubt in this week's work the highest consciousness of any class that we've ever had. I mean by that, by far, most of the people sitting in this room tonight and this morning are those who have been lifted into a consciousness whereby they are enabled to be healers to some degree, and it is that healing consciousness which is spiritual consciousness. It's the goal that we seek, and when we have a room full of it, it just means that the group consciousness is that much higher. Even if 2 or more are gathered together in spiritual consciousness, the Christ is very evident. But when there are 10 righteous men in a city, there's enough for the whole city to be saved. And so it is that the more of high spiritual consciousness we have together, the higher the rest of us are all lifted into that atmosphere. That is why the Master hoped that by having his 11 with him in Gethsemane, that he would be lifted above his trials and tribulations. It just so happened the 11 were a little too sleepy. And when he went to the Mount of Transfiguration, he took those he considered the highest state of consciousness, because only they would be able to see the revealed truth. And so it is when we have with us those of the highest state of revealed consciousness, we are enabled to see the higher phases of truth. And it has really been that way this week. I'm not going to stop now to say thank you to everybody who has played a part in this work, because I'll have opportunity in the coming weeks for that, and they will have to meanwhile understand that I feel that gratitude because I have something on my mind, and I have to get into it. This morning was the last morning of the Practitioner class. This evening is the last session of the closed class. But when you hear the tapes of this week's work, you're going to find the tape of this night's work on the same tape on the opposite side of the Practitioner series, so that you will have both the closing Practitioner tape and the closing closed class tape on one tape. And the reason is this: it's never happened before. I told you this is an unusual class. It never happened before, but the reason is this. Long about January 12th, 13th, when the inner spoke to me and told me to begin this new work, we began in Honolulu, and we began with just Mr. Nowell and Mrs. Lindsay, and very quickly Mr. Starkey smelled it up here in Central Park and flew over. And so there were the 4 of us, and then of course our 3 local students in Hawaii joined us, and we went through quite a long period of weeks of daily work, beginning at 9 in the morning and going through to 11:30 or 12 noon. And Mr. Starkey had nothing else to do, and evidently Mr. Nowell didn't feel like doing anything. So all of us would meet again sometime in the afternoon, and then at supper time, and then afterward. And along about 11 or 12 at night, it would be time for everybody to go home so as to get ready to meet at 9 in the morning again. This went on for weeks. And it was a preparation for this classwork. Now, certain things unfolded during that time, and all of them are to be found in this week's work. But on Saturday night, the night of the lecture, something happened also that has never happened before. The lecture was probably the deepest night of work that I had ever experienced up to that time. Things were revealed last Saturday night that do not appear in any of my writings and have only been hinted at in classwork. And more especially this. God isn't anything at all like we've learned in most of our scripture. God isn't anything or anybody that punishes us for our sins or rewards us for our good. God doesn't send us to hell or keep us in limbo, nor does God give us wings when we're particularly good. Another thing, when you read such statements as ye sow, so shall ye reap, or if you sow to the flesh, you'll reap corruption, but if you sow to the Spirit, you'll reap life everlasting, you're apt to believe, or apt to be led to believe, that that means that if you're a good boy or girl, you're going to get sweet rewards, and if you're a bad boy or girl, you're going to have terrible punishments, and when you look around in life, you find it doesn't work out that way. And it doesn't mean that at all. And yet that is the way we have been led to believe, that if we're good, we'll be rewarded, and if we're bad, we'll be punished. And yet once you understand the nature of God, you'll find that isn't true. You'll also find this. After you do enough healing work, you'll come to the conclusion that I've mentioned to you, whether at the evening class or the morning class, I don't remember, that when you're really up against it, up against a case of sin in a nasty form or disease in a fatal form, that all the truth you know won't help. If you could remember the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelation, it wouldn't help. And if you could remember all of the metaphysical writings in the world, it wouldn't help. You really find, when you get into the healing work, that the truth you know doesn't help. All the statements of truth you give your patients and students, you feel kind of sorry that you ever said it to them, because you don't believe them yourself anymore. You say, they don't work. I'm sorry that I let my patients and students feel that by knowing them that they would work. And you learn this eventually, that when you have a response in healing work, it is when you get inside so far that you actually feel the very presence of God. And that is the time when healings take place. And then you realize, then it wasn't because we were good boys or deserved it or earned it, or it wasn't because we knew that the truth would make us free, or it wasn't because we knew this or that. It was because the presence of the Christ became evident, tangible, visible, and it did the work. After that, you feel you'll never give anyone another statement of truth, and you'll never tell them to read another book. But you will, and you do. because you know that just as you came through that road, they will have to come through that road. You can't save them anything in the development of their consciousness. You can save them a lot of years of suffering. In other words, you can heal them by your developed state of consciousness, but you can't bring them to your state of consciousness unless they go through the same books or the same truth or the same prayers or the same affirmations until they arrive at that state of consciousness. Well, so it is, as that dawns on you, you also learn that it isn't true that if you're a good boy or girl, you'll get a good reward, and if you're a bad boy or girl, you're going to get punished. You learn that that isn't true, and the Bible doesn't mean that. It means literally, when it says, if you sow to the flesh, you will reap corruption, it means literally that in proportion as you follow a materialistic state of consciousness, you will reap materiality. Not necessarily bad. It can be good materiality, but it'll be materiality. It won't be spirituality. You'll find that when you sow to the Spirit, that's quite a different thing. Then it doesn't say that you'll reap good. It says you'll reap life everlasting or eternality or immortality. Now you begin to perceive a great wisdom, that in the healing of the sick, in the healing of the sinner, that you have to rise far above whether they're reaping to the flesh or whether they're reaping to the Spirit. As a matter of fact, you have to leave them alone. You can't take them into your thought. It can't make any difference to you whether you're treating a saint or a sinner, or whether you're treating a person with a slight cold, or whether you're treating one in the last stages of cancer. You have to forget all of that and just go inside your own being and rise above cause and effect until you get into the kingdom of God, and then the Christ takes over. The Spirit of God, the same Spirit that raised up Jesus Christ from the dead, will quicken also the mortal bodies of your patients, your students, and yourself. And you know, surprisingly, that popped out Saturday night. It shouldn't have come out in a lecture at all. It should have come out probably in a practitioner's class, but it came out at a lecture, and so it has been a theme in both the practitioner's class and the evening class. And so the class has been more or less intertwined all through the week. Probably the morning class has touched some points that we haven't yet touched in the evening, but I have a hunch that before the evening's out tonight, it will all be a part of this tape. Now, when cosmic law was first given to me to give to our students during the Honolulu series, and later in the Honolulu closed class and practitioner's class, it met with great resistance from the students. You could feel a wall going up and you couldn't get through. And several times since, I have given cosmic law, and each time found this wall. The reason you will understand. Cosmic law says God has nothing to do with the good that happens to you, and God has nothing to do with the evil that happens to you. God doesn't punish you, and God doesn't reward you. You're doing it all yourself. In other words, there's a cosmic law in the world, a law of cause and effect. And you either violate it and suffer, or you hook yourself up in harmony with it and you benefit. But the trouble is that some of this law you don't even know, and therefore you violate it continuously, ignorantly, and that leaves you with a sense of hopelessness. What can I do about cosmic law if I don't even know what the law is? And so the first inclination is to resist accepting responsibility in that way. The first temptation is to say, don't tell me about cause and effect. I'm suffering from it enough already. Get me out of it. But too much attempt is made to get you out of it merely by sitting you on cloud 9 and saying God is love and God is all. And God knows nothing about disease and God knows nothing about error. And years go by and you find yourself still battling those same problems. So, the unfoldment comes in this wise. First of all, make the acknowledgement that cosmic law operates in the experience of every human being, and every human being is under that law. The law of cause and effect, very much like getting in a draft and catching cold, or very much like putting your hand in the other fellow's pocket and taking his money instead of your own. Now, as a matter of fact, spiritually, there's nothing wrong with putting your hand in the other fellow's pocket and helping yourself, because spiritually the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and son, all that I have is thine. From a spiritual standpoint, nobody has a right to have a fence around their property. From a spiritual standpoint, everybody should have a power of attorney over everybody's checkbook. And from a spiritual standpoint, it would work out beautifully, because we'd always be working back and forth. One would have today and the next one would have next month. One would have something today and the other would have something else. It would work out beautifully in a spiritually minded society. But the human law came into being and was made to operate through the 10 Commandments, so that God no longer possessed the earth. It was the ownership of the strongest army. If you had the best general and the best soldiers, you went out and you got the most land, and it was yours, and if anyone tried to touch it, you could cut their head off. And it wasn't murder. No, it was war. And war isn't murder. And so it is, cosmic law has operated through the 10 Commandments. Do you see that? Now, when you are in violation of the 10 Commandments, you are in violation of cosmic law, and you pay the penalty for it. All right? Let us first of all agree that there is a state of consciousness which we will call the Mosaic state of consciousness, that which has been described as the law. The law came by Moses. And as long as you are in the Old Testament, as long as you are living under the 10 Commandments, you'd better live up to them and not violate them, because there is a penalty for their violation. Even if you don't get caught, there's a penalty. The penalty within yourself, conscience. And it ultimately produces physical ills. Now, in that state of consciousness, every wrong move we make, even if it's an unconscious one or a subconscious one, takes its toll of us. If we hold each other in those laws, we ourselves are held in those laws, and we all pay the penalty. Now, during this week's work, it has become very clear that every human being in the world is living in the Old Testament. Every human being is living in the 10 Commandments. And so, as the world comes to us for help, it is a simple matter to recognize that a law of cause and effect is operating. that whatever their ill or discord is the result of a universal law, cosmic law, and then comes our part in freeing them and being freed ourselves. Because the statement goes on that the law came by Moses, but grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. So that even though as human beings we are under the law, once we have recognized the fact that we only suffer because it is the law, we drop the law. We drop the law and come from the Old Testament into the New Testament under grace and truth. And how do we do that? Merely by recognizing that the law isn't power, grace and truth is power. Law only operates in belief. Because you see, violation of law is only a belief. If you steal, you're not really stealing. You're not. But as long as you believe you are, you pay the penalty for it. But once you know you don't have to steal because grace and truth is your supplier, you don't steal, you have no temptation to steal, you're not under the law of theft, not under the law of lack, you're not under the law of punishment. Oh, it is so clear that the very moment that you know you live by grace, theft, belief of theft, temptation to steal, belief that there's any gain in stealing, all of that goes out the window. The very moment that you know you do not live by bread alone, then why steal bread? The moment you know you do not live by money alone, why be avaricious? In that moment you are freed. In the moment that you realize that you do not get your satisfaction from the external world, or your supply, or your pleasure, or your companionship, you are under grace. You can bring yourself under grace in this minute. In this minute, relinquish the desire for anything and anybody in the world. This minute, in the realization, I live by grace, by the grace of God, not of man. And in that second, you have left the law, and you've come under grace. In that second that you're willing to say, I have no external needs. That doesn't mean that you won't enjoy companionship when it comes. It doesn't mean you won't enjoy a home. It doesn't mean you won't have money to spend. It means that you are saying, I don't need it because I live by grace. Not by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Do you see that? We have thought heretofore that grace was something you sit around waiting God to bestow on you. No. No, you don't have to wait for grace. You can move right out from under the law this minute. Just relinquish your desires, and you are under grace. Just relinquish the belief that you need something, in the realization that God knows your need before you do. And you're under grace. You do not have to reach out physically or mentally for anything. The very moment you know that as an individual you are one with God, joined heir with Christ in God, you can say, well, certainly I don't need anything or anybody. I live in my oneness with God. You're under grace that minute. Only do not go back and sin again. Do not go back tomorrow to a fear of lack, or to a fear of sin, or a fear of disease, or a fear of false appetite. Keep yourself living in the realization, thank you, Father, I have no needs. The Father knoweth my needs, I leave it with the Father. That's living by grace. That's living by the invisible. And you've moved out of the Old Testament into the New. Remember, the Old Testament is acquisition. The Old Testament is getting something. The Old Testament is being subject to resentments and hates and fears and envyings and jealousies. The Old Testament is always concerning itself with the other fellow, not with self, just with the other fellow, except the few great Hebrew leaders who had all of the spiritual vision but couldn't impart it, just as today it cannot be imparted to the masses. Because if you say to the masses, stop desiring something, they'll say, oh, you mean I don't have to be ambitious anymore? I should just be lazy. Or they can twist it easily to make it appear that you're trying to tell them to sit back and do nothing. And you're not saying that at all. You are merely relinquishing desire in the realization of fulfillment, God's fulfillment. You're relinquishing the desire to do it of yourself in the realization that your capital S self is doing it for you. All of this has come through in this week since Saturday night, that we have lived as human beings in the Old Testament under the Mosaic law of cause and effect. But when there's no cause, there's no effect. Now, through this statement came to us today. Every patient that comes is under Mosaic law, under cosmic law, cause and effect. In our treatment, we understand that they are no longer under the law, but under grace. That's how we free each other. I realize for you, you are not under the law. There's no law of cause and effect operating in this consciousness. There is only the law of divine grace, in which you do not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, and you do that for me. You do that for your patients and your students, and I do it for mine. And we hold each other in spiritual freedom by knowing that you are not under the law of karma, of cause and effect, not former births or births to come. But in this very instant you are passing from the Old Testament of cause and effect into the New Testament, which is grace and truth. Now we live by grace, not by personal effort, not by struggle, not by strife. Mortal man has to earn his living by the sweat of his brow. Spiritual man is joint heir with Christ and God to all the heavenly riches. You are that spiritual man when remember, if so be the Spirit of God dwell in you, when you come to the place of relinquishing the laws of cause and effect by acknowledging that you do not live under the law of cause and effect, that the law of cause and effect isn't a law unto you, that the law of cause and effect isn't really a law. It's a belief that concerns a selfhood apart from God. It's a false sense of self which brings itself under the law. In this wise, if I say, I have to pay next month's rent, I have brought myself under the law. If I say, I and the Father are one and I do not live by bread alone, I have brought myself under grace. Do you see that? If I say, I need companionship, I have brought myself under the law of karma, cause and effect. If I say, I tabernacle with God, I companion with God, I and my Father are one, I commune with God, I have brought myself under grace. Now, whenever you become a witness to some form of discord in the world, in a person, condition, circumstance, place, be alert to realize that's the Old Testament, and it's dead. For we have come to Christ Jesus and grace and truth. Ye are not under the law. Ye are not under the law. Say it to anybody you like, silently, not openly. Ye are not under the law, but under grace. The law is not a power unto you. You do not live by bread alone. You do not live because of drafts or no drafts. Neither circumcision nor uncircumcision availeth anything in Christ. The new creature is subject not unto what he does or doesn't do, but unto the grace of God. That's all you have to do when you witness any form of error. I release you from the law of karma. I release you from the law, the Mosaic law, the law of cause and effect, the cosmic law. I release you because it never was a law. Man has power to forgive sins on earth, you know. The Son of Man has power to forgive sins on earth. You can walk up and down this earth forgiving sins, healing sickness. It doesn't mean that all of those will respond to it, because there are those holding themselves under the law, and if you were to give them their freedom, they'd hasten back to it. Just the same as you can give people liberty, but you can't make them keep it. The Hebrews had to go out and get a king for themselves. Others have to go out and get unions for themselves, and others have to go out and get other kind of combinations for themselves. They can't stand freedom. And so it is that we can't give freedom to everyone because they won't accept it. But you can give it to them silently, spiritually, and then those that are ready for it will respond to it. Those who aren't ready for it will have to go on a while. But that isn't your business what they do. Your business is what you do. If you hold anyone in bondage to the law of karma, of cause and effect, of the cosmic law, you have bound yourself. If you set them free, you have set yourself free, because there's only one self. And what you do unto another returns unto you. The bread that you cast on the water returns unto you. As you sow, so shall you reap. And if you will just sow freedom, spiritual freedom, the grace and truth of Jesus Christ onto this universe, you will reap the grace of Jesus Christ in your experience. So you see that it is fitting that this message all be on one tape as a climax to both classes. And so you will find the conclusion of the morning work on the same tape as the conclusion of the evening, and you will thereby know that the entire work, morning and night, has been in the one direction, the one theme that was given us right from the Saturday night lecture, that we have only suffered by holding ourselves in a law of cause and effect, and now we walk out on the waters and free ourselves in the realization, as children of God, we are not under the law, we are under grace. Every time a discord comes into your experience, just smile at it with the realization, yeah, that's still part of the law, but I am under grace, and that law is not a power. That law does not bind the child of God. Now, there is one further point, and this is a point that was given me in a vision, and it concerns the handling of fear. Before this week, it was brought out that behind all of this world's trouble is fear. The world is fearing lack, or the world is fearing communism, or the world is fearing each other. The Arab is fearing Israel, and the Hindu is fearing Pakistan, and the Chinese are fearing the English and Americans, and the Japanese are fearing the Indonesians, and the so forth and so on. Fear, fear, fear. And we fear famine, and we fear disease. All right? It has been shown us how to break ourselves loose from fear. Do you know that if you didn't fear something or condition, fear would have no power anymore? I used this illustration, I think, this morning. Many years ago, we feared the Kaiser, and we went out and removed him. But that didn't stop our fearing, because the next thing we knew, we were fearing Hitler and Mussolini. Well, that wasn't too bad, because we went out and removed them. Yes, but that didn't help any, because along came Japan, and we started to fear Japan, which wasn't too difficult to handle, because one bomb and they were out. And now we had nothing left to fear but, our pal over in Russia, Gentle Joe. Gentleman Joe. All of a sudden we had to fear him. So we've transferred our fear to him. Now, of course, we don't know anything about Mr. Nehru, and we don't know anything about Colonel Nasser. So we're going to fear them for a little while. Now you watch what I tell you, that as long as you have an object of fear, you'll have something to fear. And you'll merely transfer it from one thing or one person to another. When you stop fearing communism, you'll start fearing Catholicism. When you stop fearing Catholicism, you'll be fearing Masonry or something else. You'll always be fearing something. Every time an object moves, something will move in to replace it. Now suppose that you were to take this position. Yes, we feared Caesar in the beginning and got rid of Caesar. And Genghis Khan and all the people and all the ideologies of all time, we feared one after another, and we still have them. We feared malaria, we don't anymore. Now it's cancer. We feared consumption, we don't fear that so much. It's heart disease. All right, let us agree to this then, that every object of our fear must prove to be nothingness, because as we have removed it, that object has been taken, another object has come into its place. Now let's chop the head off and say, I will not fear what mortal man can do to me. In other words, I will not fear any object of mortal sense, whether it's a man, an ideology, a germ, a new disease, or an old disease. I will not fear what mortal man can do to me. I will not fear any object of sense. And so as the name Russia, cancer, India pops its head up, Israel, Arab, let us, not openly in the press, I hope, secretly within ourselves say, I cannot be made to fear an object of sense. And watch what happens to fear. Fear has nothing further to feed on. The moment you withdraw from fear an object of sense, you have stopped the power of fear. You could say, as we did earlier this week, just realize that fear itself isn't a power. But the more you do that, the more you see these cancers and heart diseases and Stalins and the rest of them sticking their head up, and you say, I can't stop fearing fear. So let's go at it the other way. I shall not fear what mortal man can do to me, what mortal condition, mortal person, mortal thought, mortal ideology, mortal thing. I will not fear an object of sense, in other words. I will not fear an object. I will not fear anything that has tangible form, outline. Then you will see that we will approach one condition that can save the whole world. When the world no longer fears, its salvation is nigh. Just as if we could sit down to agree on what we want to do for this next 12 years, we would do it without fear, and we would have a most harmonious arrangement. But if we had to sit down fearing each other, distrusting each other, never could we come to an amicable arrangement, even to have another class. Do you see that? But while fear exists, no harmony can come. But fear will always exist as long as there is something to fear. So let's chop the head off. Let's chop the head of everything off so that there's nothing left in the world that we fear, and fear will go. And there's only one way we can do that. Realize this, that even if you got rid of the thing you're fearing, tomorrow something else would come along to fear. So you might as well start today to fear nothing anymore. In other words, withdraw power from effect. Withdraw power from germs, infection, contagion. Take the attitude inwardly that you have no fear of any thing, circumstance, or condition, or person. I don't mean that you can succeed in 5 minutes, but I mean that by an inner practice that you can bring yourself to a state of consciousness where it becomes absolutely clear to you that infection and contagion aren't power. You've seen them healed too often metaphysically. And then you go on from there and realize person, thing, circumstance, condition, and come to that realization within yourself, I shall not fear anything in the realm of effect. Why? All power is within me. No power is in effect. I use this illustration. Don't fear this hand, because it can't punch. I can, but the hand can't. That's a temporary state. If I think I am Joel, then you say, well, I don't fear the hand, but I can fear Joel. But supposing you've discovered that I is God, now you say, oh, now I'm not worried about that hand at all. I know what its control is. So it is. There isn't any object in this world that has an evil power once you realize that all the power there is isn't outside in effect, it's within you. It isn't even in me, it's in you. If you would only know that it's you that controls this hand, you'd have no fear of it. And you do control it because I control it, and I is you. There's only one I. There's only one selfhood. And so it isn't Joel that controls the hand, it's I. You have no reason to fear it. So it is with every object in this world, I control it. I control everything, whether I appears as Joel or I appear as you. The power of control, of dominion, is within me. Is there any other God beside me? Isaiah says, I know not any. That me is you, whether it's me or whether it's you. There is only one selfhood. Now, when you see a fist out here, or a dagger, or a gun, and you say, but I control it, now what do you think can happen? Don't you see that? It's all a question of identity. It's all a question of withdrawing power from out here. There are a lot of atomic bombs in the world, but supposing you were to realize that I control them. I don't mean Joel, I mean I, you. Would you have any fear of them? No, you're not going to turn them loose on yourself. And that's the only control there is, I. That's how you overcome fear, by withdrawing all power from the objective world and placing all power in the word I. I am the light of the world, and in me there is no darkness at all. Nothing from without can enter that defileth or maketh alive. Not even a bomb. Nothing from without can enter that defileth or maketh alive, because the control, the government, the jurisdiction is not in the effect, it's in I. And I is God. I isn't a person. Person is an effect. And there's no control in an effect. Even a person can't decide to pet or punch except in the human belief that they can. But you stop them The minute you say, no, you can't pet or punch, your hand can't pet or punch, only I can, and I won't. Do you see that? Withdraw power from effect. Consciously do it. Look at any form of error that you've ever witnessed and say, now I know thee who thou art. Nothing. The power is in I. And then go on about your business. And you will find that no person, what is it about, no weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper. Now how can you say such a thing? No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper. Why? How are you going to stop it? Did you ever stop to think of that? How are you going to stop it? By knowing that all power isn't in the weapon, it's in I. It isn't even in the, there's no power even in the person that's holding the weapon. The person is just as much of an effect as the weapon. I am God. I am all power, and beside me there is no other power. I do not divide my power with man whose breath is in his nostril. Therefore, man whose breath is in his nostril cannot pull a trigger. There is no power in the gun, in the trigger, in the finger, or in the mind of the man that holds the gun. The power is in I. And as I hold that power in I, the weapon that is formed against thee must drop to the ground, whether it's a germ or whether it's a bomb. You see, that too has been made clearer this week than ever before, although the principle is found in the infinite way in all of its writings. Yet it becomes so clear this week how to handle it. Don't walk around just denying. Look at anything and look at everything. Don't keep your head in the ground, and don't keep it up in a cloud. Look at anything and look at everything as the master looked at Pilate and say, thou couldst have no power over me unless it come from I. And then you will find that by grace and truth you have dominion over the things of the earth and the sea and the water and the sky. All power is in I, not in person, not in ideology, not in thing, not in circumstance. Now you see that cosmic law, the Mosaic law, all has to do with persons who could be good and evil. But grace and truth has to do with no person who can do good and evil. It has to do with I. I and I alone am. And beside me, there's no other powers, no other presence, no other cause, no other effect. But you, consciously, have to move out of the Old Testament into the New. You have to move out of the place where there is a cosmic law that can act upon you to the place where nothing can act upon you, since I alone is the actor. We have here two items. In a book of metaphysical writings, the following statement was made. The higher we go spiritually, the lower we sink into animality. Can you explain this statement? No, I wouldn't be able to explain it. I might be able to say this to you, that in the Old Testament, at least, it seemed that many of the, at least according to the way we read it, it seems that many of the Hebrew prophets were, shall we call it, not animal or animalistic, but sensual. They all seem to like to marry a lot or have a lot of sweethearts. So in that sense, somebody may call that animality. It isn't really animality. It's a sense of sensuality that sometimes goes with spirituality for this reason. It's really a perversion of spirituality, because what it is the spiritual love step down to human love, so that even the spiritually illumined want a companionship, a oneness, a something that they for a while humanly interpret as human relationships on one plane or another. And I wouldn't be surprised that somewhere or other that's been called animality. Now, as a matter of fact, the higher we go spiritually, the less animal we become. The higher you go spiritually, the less you will need of the grosser foods, the less you will need of material pleasures and material decorations, the less you will find yourself using the things of the world. So I wouldn't be able to explain that statement. I will only say this, that up to a certain stage of our development, as we become more spiritually illumined, we do love a closer companionship of those who understand spirituality too. And for a while, that may translate itself in even the human relationships of marriage. But the higher you go in spirituality, the more spiritually the relationship, the more spiritual the relationship becomes. And in that way then, a companionship develops that contains everything in it of a wonderfully companionable nature except animality. Now then, within the next few months, one of my writings may appear in a British magazine showing this very point, that the final stage of spirituality is when the monastic or mystical life embraces one, and a complete immunity exists to human life, so that those who become the real mystics in the monasteries no longer miss human life or human companionship. They don't even need men to talk spiritual things to. They can stay right in their cells and find their inner communion with God. That's the highest step. But before that step, there is that place where there is a complete insulation from animal desires, sensual desires, where there abides alone the desire for companionship on a spiritual level, and it can be between two males or two females or a male and a female. Makes no difference. The thought of body just doesn't enter in. And so my own experience has been that the higher you go in spiritual level, the less of animality is involved in one's life. What else this may mean, I do not know. And now the prayer, glorify thou me, Father, with the glory that I had with thee before the world was, often arises unbidden in my heart. Can you elaborate on this? Oh, of course. Certainly. Do you not realize that in the beginning God constituted our being and we knew it? Do you not realize that we were all angels, image and likeness of God, and knew it? Before we were prodigals and went down to that famous banquet with the swine, before that, we were children of God in the Father consciousness. We were both God the Father and God the Son. And that was our consciousness before the world was, the world that Jesus overcame. I have overcome the world. But before there was a world, there was I, and I was spirit. Then came the world and a sense of separation. Then comes along the Christ and overcomes the world, and you return to the Father's house and find that you are both the Father and the Son. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Communion between the Father and the Son. And all this is one. Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me. And so when this comes unbidden, it is as if the heart was saying, Father, take me into the Father consciousness again where I was before I was a prodigal and wandered out into the world. In other words, take me out of this world, overcome this world, and return me to that which I was in thee. Glorify thou me, Father, with the glory that I had. Have you ever known a human being that had any glory? No, you certainly never did. But I had glory with thee. With thee, remember, I had glory with thee. It was God's glory that I had, not mine. But that was before the world began, before I was separated, to sense, from my true identity. Now, each one of us who has come to this work has come unconsciously with this prayer. In other words, when you first were turned to metaphysics, and you thought it was because you were in pain, or because you had economic lack, or because you were lonesome, it wasn't any of those things at all. That was the decoy. It was this prayer uttering itself within you, trying to return you to the Father's bosom so that you could again be glorified with the glory that you had in God. And you were saying to the practitioner, please heal me of this disease. And if it was a knowing practitioner, the practitioner was saying, yes, I will, smiling inwardly and saying, I'm going to destroy you and your disease. I'm going to return you to the Father's house where you will again have the glory that you had before even good health took hold of you. And that is what is meant in the wisdoms in the new infinite way. We must rise above good health. Good health isn't enough. Good health is only an interlude between sicknesses. But instead of saying to the practitioner or teacher, restore me to health or restore my health, say within yourself, restore to me the glory I had with God before this world of good and bad health overtook me. Yes, this would be a wonderful daily prayer. Glorify thou me, Father, with the glory that I had with thee from before the world was. And you see, that wouldn't be asking for supply or for a new automobile. Not even for this gold Cadillac they have on Broadway now. Oh, well, you know, ordinary Cadillacs aren't good enough for us. It's the age of gold Cadillac. No, there it is. We were under the law, but now we are under grace. And we will demonstrate it in proportion as we will look any phase of discord in the face and just realize that is the law, inoperative because I am under grace, inoperative because there is no effect that has power over me, since all power is invested in I. I am the glory. I am the light of the world. I is the only law unto this universe. I is all the cause and all the effect, and I recognize nothing out here and no one out here as having power of good or evil. But everyone out here is subject unto the I that I am. And so endeth another evening, and another class, and another week of classes, and a preparation for whatever the Father will give us. Thank you.